thank you very much for coming on, Rank. For those out there listening that don't know who you are, Rankyn Campbell, you're a cousin of mine, good buddy of mine. We grew up together, played minor hockey together. We eventually played university together. Rankyn comes from a background of sports primarily and then academics. He became a therapist here a few years ago and then opened his own clinic. So I want to really dive into a bit of the hockey and a bit of the transition between hockey and obviously business and, being a therapist and stuff. So just welcome, Rank, to the show. Very excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So let's dive into the hockey part. Let's kind of go in chronological order here. You left Rexton at, 16 years old to play Tier 1 or Tier 2 Junior A. First overall pick. You had a lot of success there. Walk me through some of those early years in junior.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it now, it was just an awesome experience, and I'm really grateful for all of my hockey experience from the time I was young to even throughout junior, university, and into kind of right up to the senior and now kind of the beer league days. Those are things that I was really grateful for, and mostly it comes down to just like meeting so many good people along the way, right? And I think when you're this age and you look back on it, that's like the number one takeaway, and also some of the lessons that you learn along the way have been invaluable to me, and some of them were tough at the time, but that's one thing that I'm grateful that sports has given me in my life to this point, Sawyer. So I'm sure you would say a bit of the same.
Yeah, like it's funny. Our stories are similar. We left home at basically the same age. We moved away. We chased the dream, chased the goal, trying to play at higher levels, things. Being a young teen playing against, older teens and 20-year-old men at the time wasn't easy. You went first overall in the junior draft. Like, walk me through that. Like, where were you at the time of the draft? Did they give you a call, or how did that work? Were you at the draft? Were you talking to maybe scouts leading up? Walk me through that draft experience, because it's not everybody can say they first of all got drafted to any league, and even less people can say they went first overall. So, kind of what were you up to the day of the draft?
Yeah, well, for me, I think looking back, I was kind of on that fringe between being major junior ready and not being major junior ready, coming out of midget hockey, coming out of my second year playing midget AAA. So I was a bit of a late bloomer in that sense, especially physically. And I think that kind of the junior A route worked a little better for me in terms of my development into my later years of junior. So I was fortunate that way. And of course you're disappointed at the time that I wasn't able to sustain the jump to major junior at 16, 17, like a lot of my friends were, or you were, or people that you played against, right? Over the years. So for me, going through that experience, looking back, was really good for me, because of course you have to deal with those feelings of being disappointed. And at that point in time, I was also really fortunate to land in some good spots in Tier 2 and be able to develop, as a person, and also, as a hockey player. And then I got the chance to study along the way. So all of those things worked out in my favor in the end. And I'm grateful for that looking back, so, and then from there, just kind of, as you get older, you learn to appreciate kind of every part of the game in terms of, really enjoying it and enjoying the process, enjoying, of course, the compete, but, just the laughs and those things that you really miss once you're out of it, because right now, obviously, I don't play competitively, so.
Yeah, totally. It was, I remember, back in junior, riding the bus and, being away from home for long periods of time. And it felt like time was moving slow at time. And when I started playing junior, we were on losing teams, right? So time really went slow, but it's just funny, in the blink of an eye, it's gone, right? I mean, we look back, that's over 10 years ago now for us. And it just seems like a small blink in at least my chapter. But at the time, it did feel like a grind, at times, moving away from home at a young age, leaving your friends. There's a lot of firsts, too. Like, you're kind of becoming a man in those ages, right? Your early teens. You're developing kind of your character and who you will be for the rest of your life. And you're doing that from far away from your home and from family and things, right?
Yeah, definitely. And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, obviously I've seen your progress. Not everybody listening would have known, but Rankyn went from, like he mentioned, fringe. He went to major junior camps, almost making teams there, to the point where it was like, maybe if you had been drafted to a different team, you would have made those teams. Like, it was that close, and then coming back as a first overall pick. How do you feel that helped your game from your early teens to your later teens in junior A? Because by the end of it, you were the leading goal scorer of the league. You were, a highly sought after recruit for university teams and things like that. So how did maybe those Q camps and then those early years as a teen playing junior translate into your later years and having so much success?
Yeah, well, I think I had to work through mentally getting let go from those teams. So, that was a process for me. But when I was able to deal with that and just really approach being at the junior A level with the same sort of commitment and kind of love of the game and also that compete level, really doubling down on that, my confidence was really able to grow, and I was put in good spots by teammates and by coaches. And then over time, I was really able to develop and just really enjoy the game as well. And I've had times where I didn't enjoy the game, and at times that was playing university hockey, and like the difference in my play was unbelievable when I was enjoying the game and feeling confident out there compared to when I was in more of a mental rut, not enjoying coming to the rink or just being part of the process. So I've seen it from both sides. So I think it was just a lot of it was the mental part of it and how you prepare for that, as an athlete or just as a person in general. It could be with your job or with anything. So a lot of it came down to me with that mental side of it for me.
Yeah, I remember like our first year in Halifax, we were, I think, like the worst team in the league, and man, when you're losing consistently, like we did it together in university when we played together, it's discouraging. And it gets to a point that, a game that you love, that you grew up loving, you grew up fantasizing about, scoring the big goal or playing in the big leagues and things from, 4 or 5 years old, to all of a sudden you're kind of out of love with the game, right? When you're losing, when your teammates, maybe that you have a losing culture or maybe a toxic culture in the dressing room, it can really throw things off. And I think that, when your whole livelihood is wrapped up in what you're doing, being a hockey player, especially being Canadians playing hockey at high levels, it's a big part of who we are. I think it can be very difficult to stomach. And I love that you have so much emphasis on the mental side of things, because it's such a nice segue into the career you're in now, in the mental health space and being a therapist and owning your own clinic now ultimately, which is, really impressive. You went from being a high caliber athlete to being a therapist and owning a clinic. Walk me through, when did that happen? When did you decide that you wanted to get into the mental health space? Was this a, university decision, or when did this kind of happen, and how did it all kind of come to be?
Yeah, well, there's a couple parts of that question, but just to finish on the hockey piece, I think that to focus on the mental side, one mistake I made at 15, 16 was I believe I was good enough to make the teams, but I didn't, in those, select days in the camp, I didn't give the coach absolutely no reason to leave me off the team. Right. So then I was just kind of in the same pool as everybody else on the fringe or in the third, fourth line. So I've kind of tried to learn that lesson moving forward and be how can I make sure that I'm going to do everything in my power, no matter what it is, to control the outcome that I'm hoping for. So again, I was fortunate enough when you look back to learn that in kind of in a hockey environment. So it's helped me later in life, right? So that's kind of how I frame it. And does that make sense? I don't know if that will make sense
Yeah,
to your listeners, but
yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's. I always use the expression because I'm a little unpolished, but it puts hair in your chest, right? When you learn those hard lessons early, when you get cut, like I remember the first team I was cut from, it was U17. I felt at the time it was maybe political, but I mean, everybody,
yes,
has an excuse when they're immature and you get cut from a team,
yeah,
and I thought that, and it still sits sour with me, but it also, again, when I was, whatever, 8, 15, 16, whatever age I was, it put hair on my chest and kind of toughened me up for the real world experiences, and for me, that's what I'm so thankful for, that hockey taught me younger than most. A lot of people face those real life situations
right.
maybe in their early 20s when they first go to university, or maybe in their early 20s when they get their first job, things like that. And to your point about not giving like unreasonable doubt that you should be on the team, I remember when I was at NHL camps, and I was always
Really?
known as a harder worker and a less skilled player. I got to where I did
Yeah.
because I was a good team guy, and I worked really hard, but the skill wasn't necessarily there compared to others. And I remember being at NHL camp with guys that honestly I felt were maybe slightly less skilled than me or a similar skill set, but they worked 10 times harder, man. They were, like I say, define them as hockey robots. They ate, slept, breathed hockey. It's all they thought about. They come into camp at 5% body fat. They look like the frickin' Rocky movies, and they just worked their bags off. And those guys carved out 5 to 10 year. They were never first line $10 million players, but they carved out 5 to 10 year careers. When I was going back to university and losing games with you at Stu,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
ultimately jumping into the job force, right? And that was the difference, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, well, very, very well said. And I would echo that. And on your other question, like, so for me, I actually became really, really interested in mental health at 16. I think, I always knew since I was a kid that I was going to go into the medical field or scientific field, some field in terms of the medical community, say, in terms of
Yep.
serving my community, serving other people. I always felt that as a kid, it was kind of a gift that I had, from God or from the universe, but of course, it's hard to put your finger on it. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember at 16 years old, and it was a very good friend of my father, and your father had taken his own life at that time.
Yep.
And it was one of those moments in time where, like, I remember exactly where I was. I remember the sensations in my body. I remember having to call my dad and make that phone call about his friend. And of course, when you're young, you're growing up, you look at whether it's your uncles, your father, kind of all the stereotypical people in your community, and they to that point in time, they always have the answers, or you don't really see them crying or distressed, or and I remember going through that process with both my own father and with other people that were there, and it was like nobody had any idea what to do, and it was like they essentially had no answers, and it was like very shocking for me. It was also very sad for me
Yep.
emotionally. Like, I remember really being bothered by it, but I remember thinking at that time, okay, here's this thing that's happened, and like, we really have no answers as a society at that point. And again, that was my understanding at 15, 16 years old. There
Yep.
was other doctors and therapists and people around the world that were already working on this. But again, as a teenager, it was one of those moments that I was like, okay, I'm going to really work on this. And for me, hockey was just a vehicle that kind of helped me to get to that point, helped me to get educated. And then as the years went, there's different options that, like, of course, you could go to be a medical doctor and help in that way, or you could go to be a researcher and help in that way, or you could go to
Yep.
be a therapist, or, you know, over time, then I started to find my groove as I got into university and realized what I excelled at, what I wasn't so good at, what kind of ignited a passion for me. And then from there, I've been really, not many people know this, but like I've really been working on this since, that moment in time, which was like 13 years ago. Right. So that's how I got started in the mental health space. And then, of course, it takes years to get educated. There's tons of work along the way, and you got to go start trying to solve the problem. So I've just been on that path to where it is that I am now, and here I am now, and fortunately met so many smart, motivated people, caring people along the way, many of whom work for me and I learn from now every day. So that's been a really cool part of the process too, Sawyer.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I remember that experience as well. And I know that, maybe the environment that we grew up, of course we have our fathers are our idols, right? So as a child, they have all the answers, or so we feel. And then to humanize them and see them in such a vulnerable state when they lose such a close friend in kind of in a surprising manner. And, it was something nobody really expected, or at least the conversations with my father led me to believe that. So it's like, it's very tough to see that. And, you and I have talked, I started therapy this year too. And it's my first year of my life that I have. And, maybe I should have years ago, and exactly to your point, maybe if some of those guys would have reached out to those resources earlier, they maybe would have had more solutions in those moments of need, So I think it's really big of you to recognize that, especially at such a young age, and kind of step up and take that initiative to be that resource for the next generation, for your family, for your friends, and things like that. And I remember too, years ago when you were playing hockey junior, because we're, the same age, I think we're 4 or 5 months apart. So we were growing up all the way through. And I remember I was enrolled in university because we had to be, it was part of the rules. But none of us took it serious. Nobody on my team took it serious. I think it was like 2 courses you had to be enrolled in. And most of us didn't even go to class. We were focused on hockey. We wanted to make the NHL, and that's what we were focused on. And I remember you were always, you were a good high school student, contrary to me, but you were also really focused on school during your junior times, which is hard because we're chasing the dream. We're getting that validation from society that we're doing good. Hey, you're a good little hockey player in your community. You're doing good. And a lot of players just kind of rested their hat on that. And I do remember you back then, working hard. And then when we went to university together as well, I seen it in the flesh. So it's kind of cool to know the inspiration of that death really kind of launched you in that direction, and the mental health direction too. So huge credit to you for that. You wanted to get in the mental health space. You wanted to become a therapist. You wanted to help people, and then you took the step to be a business owner. There's a lot of people that had the same ambition as you did to, help people, and they, apply for a job somewhere, and they do fantastic work, and they help people, and they change lives, and but you decided to take it one step further and actually become a business owner kind of at the same time, and extend your reach. So where did you kind of transition from, wanting to be was that always part of the plan, to be a business owner, or kind of walk me through your thoughts there on becoming, an educated therapist, and then ultimately a business owner at the same time?
Yeah, well, and I mean, again, like, when, we kind of talk about mental health, but like, it's a very, very broad term, right? So if you're a therapist, like, you can't do everything. You can't treat everyone or work with kind of maybe every type of problem or psychological issue, or have a specialty in everything. And you're also very limited to kind of the amount of patients that you can work with, and that. So my idea was always like, you got to get first, I had to spend years getting kind of that theoretical and practical knowledge, and a lot of that sort of, as you go through graduate school and stuff, is a lot of like, you have to do your own therapy in graduate school. You have to do a lot of self-growth. You have to look at a lot of different things, even about yourself inside and out. And that's something that I try to continue now, because just because you're a therapist does not, contrary to what people believe, does not mean that you have life figured out, or you don't face your own issues or go through your own things in relationship or your own challenges, right? So that personal, for some people, emotional, spiritual, mental growth is a big part of the process. But then I was really interested. So that's kind of like step one. But then, I was really interested in like, okay, over the last 15 years, even if you go back, there's been a big change in the conversation, which is a positive thing, whether it's like you saying, I'm going to a therapist, or people saying like, you should reach out for help, right? Kind of a lot of people in society have been really doing a good job of reducing the stigma, right? Which is a really good thing. But when you look at it from a clinical perspective and from my shoes, it's like, those people need somewhere to go. Okay. Right. So it's great. So I wanted to build out the systems and the team and the framework, kind of like, to be able to create a modern mental health, essentially a hospital that is able to work through all the different things that we're seeing come through the doors. Because again, if I just hang my shingle, I'm very limited as an individual, as a person, as a therapist. My knowledge is limited. So I was really interested in that part. Okay. And trying to build that out is what I've been working on. And clinically, the other part is like, I'm getting long-winded here, but clinically, it's very, very important for psychologists, therapists, helpers to have support from one another, and to be able to have that clinical support and each other to lean on. Because if you build out the team, you're going to have the best chance of having strong, very effective therapists that continue to grow and progress, rather than, work in isolation, become very lonely, burnt out, overburdened, and eventually leave the field, because there's been a massive trend in that. So I was kind of trying to look at it in all different aspects. And then that's, again, it's like every part of who we are and where I am, what we have right now is still a work in progress. And I've, when I log on this morning, I'm trying to improve it from where it was yesterday.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I mean, to your point, you're also limited in time and energy. You mentioned limited in maybe knowledge and things. Like, you only have so many hours a day, right? And of course you have to have a personal life of your own too. You can't just dedicate 24/7 to your career. So, I think that's admirable. I think it's fantastic. And again, I went from, never even considering therapy, being a tough guy that can get through my own shit, whatever, right, to opening my mind to that. And what I've realized, the biggest thing, and kind of what I try to tell people, is you don't have to go when you're completely down on your last leg and out of luck. It's nice to just have those conversations. And for me personally, I really enjoyed having an unbiased conversation with a stranger, which in a weird way allows me to open up way more than if it was someone in my life, and someone with some knowledge and guidance and things. It's not just your best friend's subjective opinion, oh my God, you should leave that girl, like you get to talk to an actual professional that can handle it properly. And there is no subjectiveness in that. So for me, that's definitely where I've gotten the value. And just this self-growth and all of that too. Like, to me, you definitely have to be proactive with it. That's what I've realized. A lot of this stuff just won't show up on your doorstep. So if there's a book that you can pick up and read that's going to help, or, if there's a phone call you can make, or maybe you sign up for therapy once a month, or, a couple, like once a week, or whatever your pattern seems to be. In my opinion, I would definitely recommend it. And I went from being, like I said, a toxic kind of masculine man of, I can stomach my feelings, to being like, no, like this is good. I've seen the growth within myself, and I'm definitely an advocate, for the industry now, no question.
Yeah. And that's really, really good to hear. And that's one thing that, it shows that we as a society, we have done a good job in that area, and making people more comfortable than maybe they would have been, 15, 20 years ago. And I always tell people, because just because I'm a therapist, like, it doesn't mean that I think that therapist is the only or the best way for all people at all times, right? Like,
Right.
I try to take care of my own mental health in lots of other ways too, whether, there's tons of things that we can do. And the most important thing is, and all the studies will show it, is that, like, having safe and fulfilling interpersonal relationships with other people and having that support network with other people, which therapy can help with and give you those skills or those tools to be able to navigate relationships. But those are the relationships that are very important, that will help us as human beings be able to navigate life, right? Whatever life happens to throw at you or me or somebody else over however long we're fortunate enough to live. So I always put that in there because, again, I always want to advocate to people that therapy is voluntary. It's not something that we push on people. If they want to come, we're going to be here for them. And that, sometimes the time is right. Sometimes the time is not right. And it's up to them to kind of decide that. But it's another tool in the belt that they have. And we've done a good job of reducing that stigma. And we know that it does work, so that is the cool thing.
I know for me, like, one thing when I was posting on social about going to therapy, a lot of people said it was expensive, and I'm sure that you get that a lot too in your business. I mean, in my business, people tell me my stuff's expensive too sometimes. So one of the kind of questions I had for you, and you kind of open yourself up to it already, is like, what is the low-hanging fruit? What is the lifestyle suggestions and changes that you would tell someone that wants to get healthier, both physically and mentally? If somebody came to you and said, listen, I can't afford the consistent therapy, but, maybe there's other options and other suggestions you have for that can help supplement between my therapy sessions.
Yeah, well, definitely. No, it's a really good point. And, again, I'm not inventing these things. We all know it, but exercise is extremely effective, right? And not just talking about depression, but it's literally a natural antidepressant. Right. And I say that on this podcast, and I haven't exercised today. So I know that it's hard to get there. It's hard to do it. And for a lot of people, it's another expectation. But exercise doesn't cost anything because you actually don't have to go to the gym.
True.
You can get exercise in other ways. And if we increase the intensity, it's helpful. But even low intense, consistent exercise is helpful for your mood. So exercise, I would suggest that, Sawyer, to anyone, and anyone that comes to see me or my team, we're trying to encourage them to exercise if at all possible too. So the second thing I would say is, like, self-awareness is really important. It's not something that we're taught in school. Some families may teach it at the dinner table if they have the chance, but it's really a skill that's just, like, it's all about being able to take a step back and understand, asking yourself, like, how am I feeling in this moment? What am I thinking about? Where are these thoughts coming from? Okay. And a lot of therapy is learning how to be self-aware, because a lot of people are on autopilot. And that's, not their fault. It's just kind of the way that we're programmed. We're busy. We're in the rat race. But if you can learn to become more and more self-aware, developmentally, our ability to become self-aware increases with age through our teenage years. As our brain develops. But self-awareness, you can start to get it just by, tracking your thoughts, journaling, meditating a bit. Maybe some people do it through a prayer, or just literally kind of sitting with yourself and asking yourself the questions, like, with no distractions, which is much harder than most of us like to admit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's I was wondering if you were going to mention journaling, because I don't know how long I've been doing it, maybe 2 years now. I've been journaling every day during the week. The weekends I don't. but I journal every day, which helps me because I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm sure I got a touch of it. So I really struggle to stay organized. I really struggle to be present, to your point, without distractions. Feel your feelings. I'm a busybody. I'm used to just filling the gaps in my schedule and just going. And if I have downtime, I'm on my phone, or I'm on watching Netflix, or I'm playing video games, or I'm doing something. I'm never just completely still with it. And I found journaling, especially the gratitude part of the journaling that I do, and also the how I feel section, forces me to actually think every single morning, okay, how do I feel right now? And often it's tired, or often, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's just trying to create that consistent awareness, right?
And until the point where now I'm sure that it's great that if you still write it down, but the idea that I try to teach people is that you're going to be able to process it in your head without writing it down in time. Because before you even pull out the paper and write out I feel, you already have increased awareness of those different kind of states of mind and states of emotion that you may be in. So, and again, it takes time, like a skill, but you can get there. And both of those suggestions are free, which is a great thing for anyone. So I would start there. For sure, I always recommend those things, and of course, if that's not working, or you need a little bit extra, then I would recommend like reaching out to your doctor or reaching out to a professional, and kind of exploring that more professional support, and investing in your relationships. Again, you don't need 1,000 best friends. You just investing in those relationships that you can turn to, because we are social creatures. So we're we're still social creatures now, and having those supports in the good times and the bad can be very helpful.
It's we're in such an interesting time too in society. Social media has such a large impact. And I know you've been really responsible with your intake of social media over the years. I've been certainly less responsible. When you touch on being present and, without distraction, social media, guilty as charged, would be probably my number one, especially TikTok before bed in the evenings, things like that. So what are you seeing in terms of the mental health issues, or if there are issues, relating to social media and just the modern state of society with those types of tools at our disposal 24 hours a day?
Yeah, well, I think like the first thing that, I try to encourage people to remember is that like social media itself is not good or evil. Okay. Like you can consume social media, we have to put it in context. Like you can consume social media before bed every night for the rest of your life. And if it doesn't really impact you, or if it's adding more happiness or joy or value to you than negativity or impacting your mood, then like who am I or anybody else to say what you should do in that moment, right? Because the media is always going to evolve as we evolve as people. So I always kind of try to caution people with that, because of course, like everything in society right now, there's kind of very two stark camps. Like social media, we should be on it all the time, and then the other side maybe saying like, it's evil, ban it from everything all the time, always, right? No devices. So, and I have this we have this conversation with our team and as educators, and it's like, how are we going to prepare ourselves and youth and our future children to be able to navigate the world in a way that, they can be productive and healthy and fulfilled, but also take into account like the limitations and the drawbacks of it? Because right now it's tough, because you're kind of you're encouraging people to not be on social media, but maybe they need to be on social media for 8 hours for their job,
right?
Or they need to be on social media to buy their groceries, right? So it's kind of this juxtaposition that we have too. Okay, so does that make sense, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's so to your point, it's it's both sides, right? It's very polarizing. People are all in or all out, and I feel like social media might even have a part in that, you know, with the echo chambers and the things like that. You know, so to me, I always have mixed feelings. I feel guilty when I consume it for longer than I think I should, you know, but there's times when I look down and I look up and a full hour and a half, 2 hours have passed, you know, and to me, that feels a little irresponsible and potentially a little dangerous, especially if I'm consuming very one-sided echo chamber-esque content, you know?
And obviously now, as a 30-year-old man that has a lot of life experience to draw on, you're able to decipher whatever messages are coming across your phone much differently than you or I could have at 13.
Absolutely.
Or a 10-year-old could have.
Yep.
So, because again, I'm just not developed enough to have the context. And that's when it can become dangerous for kids, because then it becomes, they're not able to understand. I posted this video of me dancing and nobody liked it, but they're going psychologically from that to, oh my gosh, I'm a complete loser. Right. Which is impacting their mood, like their thought process is, I'm a complete loser, or I should harm myself, or, you know, yada, 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 which kind of just, again, I want to be cautious and clear that it's just correlated with those things, right? It doesn't mean that if you post a video, if you have a 10-year-old that's posting the video, it's guaranteed to have that outcome. But they don't have the context where maybe if I post after this call, I already understand that, like, my video is somewhat subject to a lot of logarithms that are outside of my control, that my sense of self is secure enough that, like, if it gets 3 likes or 300, it's not going to change my own feelings about myself and who I am as a person. Right. So that's kind of the catch there. And again, that comes back to self-awareness and self-development over time, when you're able to kind of have that critical thought. But social media knows, and that a huge percentage of their users doesn't have that. So that's where you really open yourself up to kind of mental health risks, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you and I just turned 31, you're turning 31 here soon. Like, we grew up in an interesting time that when we were in those development years, the early teens, like, we didn't have access to this stuff. And now we're seeing it from the other side with the next generation that does, you know, and that next generation is born into it. So they don't have the I guess the comparison that we would, seeing both sides of that coin, right? They're only getting one side of that coin. And to your point about, like, somebody's self-worth being wrapped up in ultimately what's kind of up to the algorithm. Of course, there's other tangibles through creative talent, you know, things like that, of course, but the dark forces of the algorithm, you know, and I've seen even adults older than me, younger than me, people in the influencer world, you know, with hundreds of thousands of followers, and in some cases over 1 million followers, and they're wrapped up in that too, you know, and it's to a point where, and respectfully so, they're influencers. That's how they pay their bills. If they have video after video after video that flop, not only from the vanity standpoint does that maybe crush them, but it can also affect their finances and affect their future and their career and things too, right? So there's so much at play. And what I've found with a lot of the influencers is they feel like they're at the mercy of the platforms. They feel like they're at the mercy of whatever's the hottest trend. Like, a great example is Instagram was so photo heavy for a long time. TikTok came in, disrupted the industry of social media, and now Instagram's focusing heavily on videos. Well, if you're an influencer that built your platform on photos, now you have to, just because the platform is promoting video, you have to completely transfer your skills into video. And I know that there's a lot of creators, very talented people that are struggling with that, because they maybe had success with phase 1 or 2 of the modern state of social media, and now that it's changed, they're struggling. And their livelihoods, and, you know, in some cases their finances really depend on those changes, and not just the vanity of, am I cool or not, you know?
Exactly. And you know, like, I'm an advocate for technology. I really implement a lot of technology in our team, and it helps us work well. It helps us serve patients. I use technology in my own life. I'm on my email all the time. I love my email, or looking at social media. And again, it's a way I can connect with friends, family. I think that as a society, we just have to remember that technology is going to advance faster than ethics. Okay, so that is human nature. The car was developed long before the seatbelt. Okay, so
Right.
the seatbelt didn't really come in until probably the 60s, 70s, and then it wasn't really used until the 2000s.
Hmm.
So the car was around for 100 years. That was a great technology that provided us with a lot of benefits. Of course, there's the dark side with pollution and that. And like, I think that we have to just approach social media with the same sort of critical lens and say, let's get the good things out of it, and let's promote the healthy side of it. And we use it for business, and we use it to connect with people and help us develop our lives. But at the end of the day, we want to download these kind of self-awareness, self-reflection, and critical thinking skills into the kids and the adults, like you said, that are going to be using these tools
Hmm.
so that they're able to use them in a safe and productive and effective way. And it doesn't have to be them saying, oh my gosh, never again will I use social media,
Right.
because then they're not getting the benefit of the technology.
Yeah, I love the seatbelt comparison. That's a great example because it's so true. I mean, seatbelts would have saved so many lives for 75, 80 to 100 years before people universally just started wearing seatbelts consistently, right? So I
Exactly.
think
And think about
I
it
think
now,
that's a great
like
point.
with artificial intelligence, we're just starting to take the chains off of AI right now.
Yep.
Right. So again, so it's like, I'm, as you can see, super interested in these things, because mental health is a lot of philosophy and education too. But like, I had this debate with a teacher the other day, and she said, okay, like the kids are on iPads way too much, right? That was her opinion.
Yep.
And I was trying to reflect on that, thinking, yes, we know the harms of screen time and all these things and the social skills, and this is maybe not doing it, but we're also,
Yep.
as an education society, trying to prepare kids to be able to be productive members of society in 2030 or 2035. So if they can't run the technology now, how are they going to come to work for me when I'm
Right.
saying we're 100% virtual hospital? They're going to need to know how to run technology. So
Yep.
we can't go back to the pen and paper approach for everything either.
Hmm.
Right. And I don't have a hard answer. I
Hmm.
don't have all the answers, unfortunately. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody does on this, but it's just super interesting to reflect on.
Yeah. So do you feel like I'm out of touch with the schooling system? I was a supply teacher when I graduated university, I think in 2016, 2017. I actually loved it. Teachers earn their money. I'll say that. They work hard.
Yeah.
But I'm out of touch in terms of school now in what's taught. And this awareness theme that keeps coming up in this conversation, I really like it. And empowering individuals to be more self-aware and aware of their feelings, thoughts, things like, and the world around them and things like that. Now, do you feel there's a future for that being taught at the early ages of school? It maybe, is that already being taught? Like I said, I'm far removed since, probably 2016, 2017. Like, are these things that are on the priority list of the school boards, and are these things being taught to those young kids that are early on in their development? And is there a future for that if they're not?
I think you're starting to see it come up now. You're starting to see it come. I think the school system, like public health, it's tough to make sharp changes, definitely as fast as technology changes, because it's a big system. A lot of people are attached to it. A lot of things go into the curriculum, but
Yep.
I see it kind of happening more on a case by case, class by class, or school by school basis, depending on the philosophy of that principal, that teacher, or the people in that kind of environment. But there is a ton of good things that are happening in a lot of the schools. I think that it's really starting to get that way. And even if the schools don't have the answers, I noticed that there's a huge trend of them at least recognizing, hey, this is what we should be teaching, or it would be good if we could learn how to teach this. Let's go out and find the answers, right? Which is kind of why they're coming to us, looking to kind of us for guidance on that. And, we're learning along the way too, because it's really tough. The schools have a tough job trying to prepare people for the future, but also manage the day to day and try to be a really safe place where kids can come and feel welcome. And so I hope that it's going to continue. So
yeah. And it's funny, like as I grew into a man and I started to look back at my childhood, and I won't speak directly to yours, but I know that, you come from a loving household and things like that. And I certainly did. I mean, my parents were split up, but my parents both loved me, and I had a lot of love and friends and family and stuff around me. And and when I realized, mainly when I started supply teaching, is like, not everybody had that, right? So not everybody has that foundation. Not everybody has that. And not everybody has the, good job today when at the end of the day, or at the end of when they get a good mark on the math test, or they play a good hockey game, or, they not everybody has that. And that's certainly something that I learned getting back into teaching for the year that I did, and then just kind of growing up and maturing and being more aware of those things. And I think that, for those kids that don't necessarily have that, I think that the foundation at school, maybe they don't have a great foundation at home, is even more important. I mean, I'm sure that you would agree with that. And I guess, like, how do you feel for the children that don't maybe have the best type upbringing, household and things? How do you feel about the importance of that in school, or just in therapy in general, working with children, things like that? Like, just speak on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the schools do so much more than, X's and O's. Like, there's so many teachers out there that like are pulling so much extra weight and really stepping up for kids. And honestly, they're saving kids' lives along the way, because many kids would end up as a statistic if it wasn't for that school environment and the teachers that are pouring those other extracurricular things, the love and the kindness and the extra snacks into them. So right off the bat, we got to acknowledge that our educators are doing like a phenomenal job of that, and they're playing a huge role in society. And for kids, we know that, like, from a mental health perspective, there's a lot of research on attachment, which just means for most of us, it's that first relationship that we have as kids with either a mother or father or parent or a guardian. For some people, as they grow up, it can be a sibling or a cousin. But like, that strong attachment is like the basis of a lot of their mental health and well-being moving forward. And it helps them navigate the world from essentially the perspective that the world is a good place and I can trust people, right? That's kind of what it downloads into them when you securely attach with a parent. For kids that might not have that because their parents are struggling or not available a bit, teachers and principals become that. And it doesn't need to be the parent. It can be that one secure attachment that they form in a school. And that attachment base really changes their life. And that is something that they have access to in school. Like, and that is something that the schools are doing an excellent job of it. And I just want to put that out there, because I know there's a lot of teachers out there that really do a lot of extra. Like, your mom is one, and she's forming that and doing much more than therapy or doctors are doing for that one kid, in terms of kind of setting them on a path where they're able to handle with a good chance what life brings at them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Mom, she works at they call it the alt psych, and she works with a lot of students that struggle functioning within the regular schooling system, and some with different backgrounds and stuff. And yeah, you're right. And I know your mother too worked in the school system for a long time.
Yeah.
And just the compassion that come from those two women is probably where we get some of our empathy and compassion, and some of our better qualities too, right? Because we were fortunate enough to have that growing up, and I'm really proud of my mother and your mother and the people that fill that role for those kids, because I seen it, when I was supply teaching and just observing, I seen the kids consistently eating alone. I seen the kids wearing the same outfit 5 days a week, that hasn't been washed. I see that stuff as an adult. Of course, when I was in high school, I was so focused on my own shit that I maybe didn't pay attention to it all the time. But, I seen it now as an adult, and I see more and more how important those figures are, like you said, those people that can form those bonds maybe at school. And even if it's only from 9 o'clock till 3 p.m., during the school system, it's a lot better than nothing, and some of those kids, don't really have that much. So,
Exactly.
To your point,
Well
I
said.
think it's really, really important. But I wanted to ask you too, Rankyn, like the future of your business, the future of Campbell Health, like what is the long-term vision there? Talk to me a little bit about the actual business, how maybe your role has changed from start to where you are now and where you see it in the future.
Yeah. So our company does three things in the mental health space. So we do comprehensive psychological assessments, which are for kids that may have a complex diagnosis such as autism, ADHD, something that you're not going to get if you just kind of log on somewhere or go to a public therapist. So we have a big specialty in that. We have a number of psychologists that work on that. That was really important to me when I started out, was to be able to offer that, because at the time in the public system, that wait list was 3 to 5 years for any kid that wanted that diagnosis. So it was a big goal that I had there. So we do that well. My team has done an excellent job. Kudos to them in that area. And then the second thing that we do is that typical psychotherapy. So that would be with teens, adults, couples, families. That could be for a range of things. It could be kind of what we're talking about today, which is more of the, hey, I'm functioning okay, but I'm looking for some self-growth, or I'm looking for help in my relationships, or I hit this stressor, or I'm trying to make this decision. We have therapists that specialize in that, but then we also have therapists that specialize more in like complex addictions or mood disorders where people are really, really struggling. So we have that aspect of our business. And we also see kids there for therapy as well. And the third thing that we do, which is different than kind of the typical kind of therapy clinic, so to speak, is that we do a lot of consultation and B2B work on organizational psychology. So we'll go in and work with businesses on their employee health, their employee wellness. We'll work on their team functioning. We'll help them with burnout. We'll help them with conflict resolution. We'll look at their team and be like, okay, I think this is where you guys are struggling from a mental health standpoint, because a lot of organizations right now are really struggling with, employee recruitment, retention, mood at work, kind of that morale piece, which of course hurts productivity or whatever sort of outcome, whether it's a social service or an actual core, whatever they're trying to accomplish there. If the employees aren't well, the business is not going to be producing at the output that it could.
Right.
So we do those things. In terms, any questions about that? Because I know that's kind of like, it's probably talking past there, but.
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't even aware that you did that piece, so that's really interesting and I think really valuable. I mean, we're both business owners. I own my business here, and there's certainly days that there's struggles and there's conflicts and there's issues, and it's business. And it's funny, like the perception of business and business owners from people that have never run one is certainly different than the reality of business owners and the struggles. And it's not always, and I always say this, it's not always easy. It's in my opinion a harder path to choose, but also more rewarding, and I think that's why we choose that path ultimately. But imposter syndrome is real. Conflicts within the workplace is real, and ethics and all of that, and the mental health issues that can occur, and people are living their lives too, right? Like, there could be a death in the family of one of your coworkers, and maybe they don't want to talk to you about it, but maybe it's, you know, causing them some struggle on the
Yep.
side. So I think that's a great piece, the B2B piece. I wasn't aware that you you know, that you did that. I know that you do a lot of virtual work. Talk to me about the balance between like in-person visitation or appointments versus virtual. Like, what's kind of the look there?
Yeah, well, right now, about 85% of our care is virtual, Sawyer. So,
Yep.
you know, and even all our administration care, we've moved it to be completely virtual. That's opened it up in terms of, again, for our own recruitment, talent, bringing smart people into our organization, and
Hmm.
being a modern employer. People want to work virtually, and we want to be able to have people that are looking for appointments have access to us at a much wider range. So right now, in terms of kind of that first piece I spoke about,
Yep.
that comprehensive assessment is still something that needs to be done in a physical space. There's a few parts of it that you can do in terms of consultation virtually like this, but
Okay.
it still takes place in our physical office. But our therapy is primarily virtual. And then we see, you know, that third piece of the B2B. Sometimes that is us traveling to organizations, you know, to do presentations or to speak.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's jumping on calls, running things virtually. So our team is located kind of everywhere at this point. We have employees in
Mhm.
Ontario, Nova Scotia, across New Brunswick. So we're definitely a virtual employer. And you know, I will add that the other big thing is like it was very, very important to me to have the strong clinical team. And as I got that built up and I knew, okay, people are in good hands. Now, over the last 6, 8 months, it's really been looking at kind of everything else that goes into receiving care as a patient. Because, you know, at least for me, whether I try to call my doctor or my bank or anyone, if
Mhm.
I can't get a hold of them, I'm extremely frustrated. And when it
Mhm.
comes to somebody that's dealing with a really pressing issue in terms of their mental health or loved one's mental health, I wanted to be able to address that. So what we did is we built a virtual admin team where you
Yep.
can text our line, you can call us. It's all remote phone service, and we've really increased our capacity that way because for a while there, as we grew, we were struggling on that piece.
Yep.
Just as we were kind of getting inundated, some of our systems started to not be able to handle it. So moving forward, we're going to continue to grow in that way so that we remove the stress on the patient of everything except their appointment. So if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So the texting, just to provide some clarity, the texting service, you know, if I had some, you know, maybe negative thoughts
Yep.
after hours, I could contact you or a team member of yours that way. Is that the idea?
We're not at that point yet, but you can contact our admins. So
Okay.
when you go back to kind of who's accessing service and that part about technology, we know that there's so many different demographics, especially when you're trying to provide care in a rural and remote province, right? Which
Yep.
is what we live in,
Yep.
and a rural and remote country, really. So as a healthcare team, I want to be able to provide service for the 65-year-old that is finally, after 60 years, deciding to pick up the phone.
Right.
They want to be able to talk to somebody or at least get, you know, a human voice on the other end,
Mhm.
because this is the hardest phone call they've ever made, maybe.
Mhm.
So I need to be able to provide that for them. But then what about the teenager, that support team that they've never seen a landline? They want to
Yep.
be able to text and say, hey, I want an appointment.
Right.
I want our admins to be able to handle that and just say, okay, are you available between these times or whatever? And then,
Yep.
like, of course, we have the online booking and stuff, but that's just kind of as you're funneling people through, there's so much you need to think about
Yep.
in that sense, because ethically, there's a lot of different things that you need. And of course, you know, with certain mental health disorders, some people may not be able to talk to you on the phone.
Right.
Right. They may have been kind of hanging out in their house for 6 months. They haven't really talked to anyone. So if their only way to access us is that way, we're not being very barrier free.
Right. You're making yourself available. You're making yourself as available as possible.
Right. Trying to think about those things. And of course, you know, we're growing, we're trying to adapt with technology, with the times.
Yep.
But also not leaving people behind. And I'm learning with it as well, and always trying to remember, like, certain things are very easy for me. I could book on an email, a text, or a call, but which kind of brings me to my next point when you talk about like how my role has developed. Well, right now I have a very small caseload personally in terms of people that I see, because most of my time is spent running our team, you know. But I feel it's important, at least in this part of my career, that I always have a small caseload, because it keeps me grounded each week, each, you know, month, knowing, okay, this is kind of, it's that very real reminder of like, okay, well, if you make this shift, this could be a problem, right? Like, it puts me right in the line of patient to therapist interaction again, which can be very valuable in terms of how you want to move your organization forward to make sure that you have ethical care and you have accessible care. Make sense?
The accessibility to me personally was so important. I had the option of maybe in person or virtual. I'm busy. I prioritize my time. You know, the closest clinic outside my own small town would be an hour's drive, you know, which is an hour back during the week. You know, I was unwilling to do that, where the virtual component, and that's what I love so much about your business, is that virtual component. It accommodates the client, you know, because I often book them on my lunch break, and I'd be making a lunch with my AirPods in, and I'd be just talking as if I was, you know, just kind of shooting the shit with a friend, but we're talking about real and important things that I'm benefiting from week over week. And my actually my therapist, I work with a general therapist for a while, and then I niched down and I did my research, and I found someone more specific that focuses on kind of the issues that I directly had, and it was very expensive. It was remote. She's from the UK, but it was fantastic, and I would recommend. I read her book, actually. She's an author as well. I read her book. I would recommend it to absolutely anybody. And she also had a WhatsApp service where, when in doubt, you know, I could reach out to her, and I, you know, I paid a premium for that. And I know that that's not, you know, not everybody can maybe do that, and I'm not trying to be boastful with that, but it was definitely what I needed at the time, and those were the resources that I really, again, benefited from. So to me, the virtual thing, I love it. I think it's accommodating, making yourself available to anybody and everybody. With, you know, myself, just a common person, I wouldn't consider that maybe someone wouldn't be comfortable jumping on the phone, and texting would be their most comfortable way of communicating. You know, until this conversation, I didn't even think about that. So it's really nice to see that your head's in the game and you're kind of thinking about everything and trying to best serve everybody. Because as we know, you know, there's a lot of people that need this stuff, and there's a lot of people that you know, maybe didn't do it for the same reasons that I didn't. And what I would say about that is, you mentioned, you know, it might be a difficult conversation for that 65-year-old to pick up the phone, but man, I'll tell you, once you pick up the phone, you have that conversation. Once you hang up the phone, you feel like a brand new person, because you just unloaded a ton of baggage, you know, to a professional that's going to take good care of you, and that's going to respect your boundaries and obviously the confidentiality and things like that. So again, just a huge advocate for it.
Yeah, no, very well said, and very well said on all aspects, right? In terms of the virtual care, and that's what we're trying to do here too. So the good thing is now, and kind of brings us back to where we started, there's so many smart, motivated, caring people out there in the world, in this field and in many fields, that, like, you know, it shows that as a society, we can attack these problems, and we can attack other problems that we're facing as a society too, right? Whether that's social media or climate change or any sort of kind of social problem. So that's the encouraging thing.
Thanks a lot, Rankyn, for coming on. Huge help. I think that this is a really important subject that isn't talked about enough. I think it's cool that two, former hockey players that, culturally aren't necessarily the first types of profile to jump into these conversations. I think that means a lot. I really hope that people listening really benefit from this. They take it serious, and, they look you guys up. So just, I guess, with those closing thoughts, where can people find you? Where can people, access your services and become a client of yours?
The easiest way to find us is at our website, campbellhealth.net. You can see kind of all our services, everything that we do and what we offer, as well as how to get in touch with us if you or somebody that you love is struggling. So I would start there. We are on the social medias, the LinkedIn, the Instagram and Facebook as well, and we can take messages from there. But so you can find us on there, and thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. It was a cool conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers.
The Sawyer Hannay Show.